afternoon, ladies, gentlemen and fellow young farmers. My name is Mena Breeze, I'm a member of Bradfordshire Young Farmers and I'm your chairman. I would like to welcome you all here to today's meeting, which will take place as a debate and which I now declare open. The motion we will debate today is, this House believes that farmers should be allowed to close footpaths, rights of ways, to the general public if there are animals in the fields. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speakers. On my right, and proposing the motion, is Miss Natalie Morris and Mr. Owen Morris from Stockport YFC. On my left, and opposing the motion, is Miss Rosie Thompson and Mr. Jonathan Hurd from Cumbria YFC. The procedure the meeting will follow today is, the proposer will put forward the motion for debate, followed by the opposer, who will reply. The proposition and opposition will each then be respectively seconded. The first and last minute of each speech will be protected time. The remainder of the speech is unprotected time, during which members of the panel can raise points of information to the speaker. These do not need to be addressed through the chair, but need to be kept precise. I will signal the beginning and end of unprotected time using the bell. I will then throw the debate open to the floor of the House, when you, ladies and gentlemen, will have the opportunity to make any comments. The opposer will then sum up, followed by the proposer speaking for the last time. Both of these speeches will exist wholly of protected time. I will then summarise the main points for and against, and a vote will be taken. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to call upon Miss Morris to propose the motion.
Members of the House, this House strongly believes that farmers should be allowed to close footpaths, right-of-ways, to the general public when there are animals in the fields. For too long, ramblers have roamed unrestricted through fields of stock, putting themselves, the farmer's livelihood, and the animals in danger. We, the proposition, demand an end to this. Not just for the farmer, but so that the public can enjoy our beautiful British countryside safely, responsibly, and without fear. In 2015, cattle were officially named the most dangerous animals in Britain, so we are baffled as to why we are not doing more to protect people from them. Over the last 15 years, 18 members of the public have been killed by cattle, and all of them were present on commonly used rights of way. Now, some may argue that 18 is not a significant number. Well, we say that is 18 too many.
On a point of information,
Yes, please.
You say that we aren't doing enough to protect the British public from dangerous cattle you mentioned, but there is legislation in place to protect the public in that, such as farmers aren't allowed to put bulls on fields where there's a public footpath over the age of 10 months.
Thank you. I am aware of that legislation, so they can have them if they're under 10 months, and if they've got cows with them, but I think you'll actually find that cows with calves are probably one of the biggest risks to the public, so that legislation is not enough. Peter Jakeman, a 62-year-old from Callington, was trampled to death whilst walking in Derbyshire. Liz Crosley, a 49-year-old from Warrington, was trampled to death in the Yorkshire Dales. These are real people with real family and friends. We cannot turn back the clock, but we can back this motion today and ensure others don't suffer the same tragic fate. The rights of way we see today were originally created hundreds, even thousands of years ago, so people can walk to work, walk to school, walk to the nearest village. So much has changed since then, so why do we still think it's acceptable to walk through a field of dangerous animals? The opposition are stuck in the past. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that they were made for the travelling to work and seeing the countryside. I appreciate your point that times have changed. However, people from the urban areas, they want to see the countryside, and your proposal is going to stop them from doing that, and I think that's unfair.
I don't think you can compare a leisure activity of seeing the countryside on a Sunday afternoon to actually physically needing to get to work, which is what they were originally designed for. As I was saying, the opposition are in fact stuck in the past. Would they take their dog for a walk through a lion enclosure? No, because they don't need to, it's dangerous, and frankly, it's a ridiculous idea. The exact same principle applies here. Those who oppose this motion may argue a farmer should simply move his stock away from the footpath. Have they ever tried moving a group of flighty limousine cattle? These are exactly the sort of comments we expect to hear from people who don't understand the countryside, and they're the ones who will get injured as a consequence of their naivety. Many farmers have footpaths running through several of their fields, so they don't have anywhere else to move their stock to. And why should they? It's their business, it's their livelihood. You wouldn't go marching up to any other business owner and demand he shuffle things around so you can go for a jolly through his office on a Sunday afternoon. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen the YouTube star Fenton the deer-chasing dog. Now, albeit he hilarious to watch, the consequences of dogs chasing farmers' livestock can be disastrous at best. As a dog owner myself, I was horrified to find out that over 30% of sheep worrying cases result in the death of the dog, as the farmer is well within his rights to shoot them. I, for one, would much rather these routes were cut off from me when necessary, so I did not ever need to find myself in such a tragic situation. Let it be clear, we are not suggesting that farmers close all 300 million acres of open access land all year round. We simply request they have the right to do so when needed. For example, when cows have calves at foot and will naturally want to protect their young. It's the farmer who will be held liable if one of his animals attacks a walker, so surely he has the basic right to close the footpath and safeguard his livelihood. It may be difficult for the opposition to understand the stress of anyone being able to walk through your field of livestock at any given point in time, so I put it to all of you. How would you feel if someone was killed on your land by your livestock through no fault of your own? Members of the House, the right to roam has gone too far. I implore you to back this motion today and protect the rights of British farmers. If you oppose this motion, you are endorsing bureaucracy and the negligence of the British public and government. You are not walking through a park. You are walking through someone's home, through their livelihood. So I beg you to back this motion today. Side with us. Protect our farmers, protect our animals, and protect our public.
Thank you, Ms Morris. I would now like to call upon Ms Thompson to oppose the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Jonathan and I are here this afternoon to oppose the motion that farmers should have the right to close footpaths or rights of way when there are animals in the field. As you have heard repeatedly from the proposition, there have of course been cases in the past where members of the general public have been injured by farm animals on public footpaths. If you take into account the huge amount of traffic that these rural footpaths see and how rare these incidents are, it is simply ridiculous to use this as an excuse to close footpaths at the convenience of a farmer. The Animals Act of 1971 introduced liability for injury caused by a dangerous animal. This applies to an animal with a known tendency to cause injury or harm, and not just those listed on the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. It therefore applies to domestic animals such as dogs or cattle, and those that possess dangerous characteristics which are not normally found within these same species, or are not normally found except at times such as calving or breeding.
On a point of information, yes, please. As a vet myself, I fully understand the Dangerous Dogs Act, and that is put in place so people don't have to encounter dangerous dogs. So this is what we are asking for, that the public should not have to encounter dangerous cattle.
But that isn't just what you're proposing. You're not just proposing that they shouldn't be encountering dangerous cattle. You're saying that footpaths could be closed. It doesn't specify that it's for cattle. It could be anything. It could be sheep. Thank you for your point there. It is therefore already in the interest of farmers to keep potentially dangerous farm animals, for instance, like the proposition mentioned, suckler cows with calves, off footpaths at the risk of injury liability. These laws are in place to protect the relationship between agriculture and the general public enjoying the countryside.
On a point of information,
Yes,
I do not feel the regulations are protecting the public. If you listen to my statistic about 18 people being killed, obviously they're not working, and that's why we need to take further action.
I accept your point, but this motion is too extreme in that it would give farmers the right to close a footpath for an entire year if he so wished, and I don't think that's far too extreme.
On a point of interest?
No, thank you. You may argue that this farmland belongs to the farmer, whether they inherited it or whether he bought it with hard-earned money, and therefore he should be able to do as he wishes with it, whether this be closing a footpath or putting whichever stock he feels he wants to in whichever field he wants. But I would urge you to see that enjoyment of the countryside is a much wider issue than this. The chances are that that footpath was there before that farmer owned the field and will be there long after his day, and it is terribly short-sighted to risk the integration of the general public and British agriculture, especially in a time when agriculture needs more support than ever from consumers. And Jonathan will cover this more in detail when he seconds my opposition of the motion. Other businesses may be affected if footpaths are closed. Cafes, farm shops and other tourist-based enterprises may well lose custom if the footpaths are closed. I think it should be staringly obvious that anything that discourages the public and tourists from visiting and spending money in the British countryside is a great shame, and if repeated around the country will be hugely detrimental for all kinds of rural businesses. No, thank you. This motion is highly impractical. If a footpath is to be closed, there is no way that walkers could be warned before they got there, and it is likely that it will ruin their plans and leave a lot of walkers very disgruntled.
On a point of interest?
Yes, please.
I think we live in a day and age of internet, and all walkers are prepared before they go out. They go out with their coat, they go out with their water. I'm pretty sure they would check on the internet or whatever service the council puts in place to check that footpath is actually shut or open.
Thank you very much for the point. I think it's just hugely impractical that there would be a policy good enough in place to warn walkers about any footpath that a farmer could choose to close the day before. Thank you very much for your point, though. I would respectfully ask the learned proposition how this could possibly be policed. No, thank you. And in another matter of absurd impracticality, the motion does not specify which animals qualify for potential closure. Can you imagine dialling 999 because a walker has ignored your closure because they're about to risk their lives walking through a field of store lambs? I can't imagine the already stretched police force looking very favourably on this. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will hear enough today to convince you that this ludicrous motion cannot be passed. It is unrealistic, it's dangerous, and it is highly impractical. I implore you to vote with Jonathan and I and oppose this motion for the good of the British countryside, which we all care for so much. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms Thompson. I would now like to call upon Mr Morris to second the proposition.
Members of the House, for too long now, walkers have been allowed to access farmers' land freely with minimal restrictions. I, myself, am a livestock farmer and know the true unpredictability of all livestock. So how can the opposition claim that walkers are capable of keeping themselves safe? Farmers cannot be responsible for the safety of walkers going across their land, as no farmer can say with 100% complete confidence that their livestock are always safe. The opposition has stated some figures to us today, but government legislation bans bulls of certain dairy breeds and bulls over the age of 10 months from fields which have a footpath running within unless accompanied by a female. I would personally like to plug the individual which made up this ridiculous legislation to keep people safe into a field with 10 freshly calved limousine cows and calves, or 40 Welsh black bullocks. Only then would they know the true unpredictability of all livestock. Of course we need to encourage people into our countryside. Tourism is worth £29 billion to the rural economy, making it a massive contributor. But the bottom line is, the safer the countryside is, the more people will visit it. Yes.
I don't think you're really giving farmers enough credit. You said you're a livestock farmer yourself, as am I, and we, like I say, we know how wild beef cattle can be when they've got young calves with them. Do you not think that farmers have enough sense to know that not just with the bulls, but if they know they have flighty limousine cows with calves, they'll have the sense to put them in a different field?
I'm sorry, but not every farmer has the opportunity to move it off a field which is a footpath running in. Some small holdings might just have 2 or 3 fields, and that footpath might go straight through the middle of their farm. As I was saying, I cannot imagine a footpath being closed being major front page news, but someone been savaged by a bull certainly would be, and would have harrowing effects on the local community. The opposition said that we're only talking about cattle today, but we are talking about sheep as well. They said about the safety of the walkers, but it's the safety of the sheep we need to consider too. Between 2011 and 2015, dog worrying cases increased by 64% in the UK.
Point of information.
No, thank you. That was 1,069 cases in 2015, of which, on average, 4 sheep were killed in each case. That was 4,279 sheep killed as a result of irresponsible walkers walking along across their land.
Point of information.
No, thank you. A footpath allows a walker to come onto a farmer's land any hour of the day or night. It is our home, our livelihood, our business you are walking across. We, as farmers, are custodians of the land, and it's because of us that the countryside looks the way it does today. We're only being told how we should farm and what we should do on our ground. But never mind the right to roam, let's bring in the freedom to farm. So, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you all to move this motion today and put an end to these needless deaths and injuries. I am passionate about farming, and even more passionate about the safety of those who use the countryside. The risk created by walkers passing through fields with livestock within is immense. Livestock can be unpredictable. Livestock can be territorial. But most importantly, livestock can kill. Members of the House, back this motion today and bring common sense back to the countryside.
Now to conclude the first part of the debate and seconding the opposition is Mr. Hurd.
Good afternoon. I second Rosie and oppose this absurd motion. The British countryside, areas of outstanding natural beauty, national parks. All things which us, the great British public, are proud of and therefore need to and want to show off. In an ever-urbanised world, the movement away from our rural areas and inevitably the lack of understanding of our countryside grows. As a result, the knowledge and understanding of where the food we eat comes from has reduced. Some people believe milk comes from hens and potatoes grows in trees. The majority of the general public just don't have any idea. Therefore, it is ever more important we should be educating the general public about where our food comes from to ensure the survival and growth of our British farmers and rural communities. Allowing the opening of our British countryside is one way of helping to educate the general public where their food comes from. Therefore, I oppose this horrendous motion of farmers closing footpaths when animals are in the field. It is in the farmer's best interest that the footpaths are left open to ensure the education of the British public.
On a point of information.
Yes.
Most farmers do want the footpaths to be open when they can because they want tourism because that reinvests into their countryside. What they don't want is people being injured or their animals being injured by dogs or the people catching diseases such as toxoplasmosis because that brings bad press to the farming community, which is not what they want at all.
I take your point clearly. However, the point of this motion is that the whole footpath system could be closed and no person from any urban area could be able to explore the rural countryside and therefore they would not know what was going on.
Other points of interest?
No, thank you. It is in the farmer's best interest to keep them open. Then the British public then purchase the products that are made on this land, made more aware of where they are from due to access to the British countryside. In addition, the motion is highly impractical, as I've just alluded to. If the farmer is allowed to close only part of a footpath, this will in turn disrupt the whole natural flow of the footpath. Just the proposing team suggests the farmer need to install alternative routes on the footpaths if the footpath is blocked, because otherwise the footpath user will have to turn around and walk the path they've just walked or find an alternative route.
On a point of information.
Yes.
That would be a shame if you were going for a walk in the afternoon and you had to turn around, but you should be checking your routes first, as most ramblers do, and I would much rather be turned around the footpath than accidentally walk into a field of bulls.
So would you rather the rambler walking through another footpath, which is not a footpath, but another field to try and find their route? I think that's going to be, you wouldn't be able to police it, and you wouldn't know where their walkers were, and it's just a completely ridiculous idea. There is already legislation in place with regards to livestock footpaths, as we already alluded to. Section 59 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 bans the keeping of bulls in fields crossed by rights of way unless they are under the age of 10 months. So why confuse the situation further with further impractical red tape? I understand the danger associated with cows and calves, and us public would not be so stupid to walk through a field of lions, as our proposing team like to say. However, there's no reason to stop a walker's freedom because of a farmer's ignorance. Freedom which, may I add, many footpath users appreciate and do not take for granted. Many live in urban areas and rarely have the opportunity to smell, see, feel and listen to the beauty of our British countryside. So why does a farmer feel they have to stop this freedom? A freedom which many farmers do take for granted. The motion is impractical, unkind, not thought through, and in turn provides a negative image of our British countryside. So please vote with Rosie and I against this ridiculous motion and save our countryside.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to throw the debate open to the floor of the House. May I remind you the speakers are not required to address any comments from the floor at this time, but I'm sure they will endeavour to clarify any points raised when they speak again. All comments must be addressed through the chair, and as we are limited to just 5 minutes, I would appreciate if you keep your comments as brief as possible. Please could I have the first comments?
Madam Chair, what if there was a farmer with a very limited number of fields and he has 2 bulls over the age of 10 months old? He'd be very limited as to where he put his stock and therefore restricting his business.
Are there any further questions? Yes, sir.
Probably Devon farmers. I think the proposition, one of their first points, was cows are the most dangerous animal in the country. I think you probably should revise that. I think humans are the most dangerous animal in the country. So on that point, should we ban the public passing through places like Salford?
Yes, sir.
The proposition talk about minimising the dangers by closing footpaths. Surely avoiding all dangers is impossible in life. When I walk home from a night out at 2 in the morning, it could be considered a danger. They cannot achieve 100% safe society.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think Raymond Williams, I think there'll have to be a lot more signs for that, warning the public of the dangers, the giving option to travel, dangerous stuff.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious really. We're just going to have to let Brazil produce the beef, New Zealand produce the lamb, or our farmers are going to have to produce safer animals.
Yes, sir.
When I've seen other danger signs, I think it doesn't mean stop, it means bring it on.
Are there any further questions? Yes, sir.
It was mentioned that how dangerous a field of store land would be, but it would be the danger to them more than anything. Even if you think your dog is a nice, tame little whatever breed it is, you don't know what that animal's going to react like until you get it in front of sheep, things like that.
Hannah Bassey, Shropshire. I just wondered whether both parties felt like the general public has enough of an awareness already about the dangers of farm stock in fields. Potentially the closure of these footpaths might actually make them appreciate just how dangerous certain animals can be, like the Limousin calves and foot that you mentioned.
Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, I would now like to ask Ms Thompson to sum up the opposition.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've had quite a lot of scaremongering from the proposition today. They started off by saying how ramblers and walkers walk unrestricted around people's farms. I don't think this is entirely the case. In a lot of cases, there are mown-off tracks and a lot of signage to point people in the right direction. They're not just ambling around people's farms totally unrestricted. To pick up on a couple of points from the floor, the lady from Cumbria, she said, you know, what would happen if a chap had 2 bulls and he was very restricted on his fields. I take that point. But there are other options. It would probably be a worthwhile investment for him to, say, fence off the path, and there are grants available to help him with funding such fencing. the gentleman in the blue shirt there, I think the general public, if they are going to go and walk in the countryside, they are aware that there will be a certain amount of risk. They are not completely clueless. And if you want to go into the countryside, I think they want to see cattle, they want to see sheep, and they don't want to walk through empty fields, just like they don't want to have their day cut short by a footpath being closed. So I think, you do have to give some people credit that you have to expect a certain level of risk. Going to the sheep worrying point, I think a huge amount of that is educating the British public that there is no excuse for a dog being off a lead in a field of livestock, or even around a farm. Even if there isn't livestock in that particular field, if you're around farms, dogs have to be on leads. Now, we come from Cumbria, which is an area with a huge acreage of common land, which is just that, a common area for both farmers and the public to enjoy alike. Should the proposition succeed and this ridiculous motion be passed, in theory, one disgruntled farmer could close an entire common, which could extend to several hundred acres if he had sheep grazing it. And I think you'll agree this is just absolutely absurd. There's no reason that farmers should have this power over the general public and take away people's rights to enjoy the British countryside. If this power was given to farmers, I'm sure the majority would use it responsibly. However, one uncooperative farmer could hypothetically have the power to shut a footpath for an entire year and then forever if he had so much as a pet rabbit grazing in it. This motion is so ill-worded. You've heard from my colleague Jonathan that integration with British agriculture and the general public is essential for growth of the industry. The proposition are entirely deluded if they think that this motion, if passed, would not have a detrimental effect on the great British countryside. People like Jonathan and I are passionate about the relationship between producers and consumers, and this absurd motion stands to destroy that relationship. I implore you, members of the House, to vote with Jonathan and I to oppose this short-sighted and badly worded motion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms Thompson. Ms Morris will now sum up for the proposition.
Members of the House, following this afternoon's proceedings, there should be no doubt in your mind that this motion must be carried. In the build-up to leaving the EU, we need now more than ever to stand behind our farmers and care for our countryside. You've heard about the risks to the walkers, the animals, the farmers, and these risks will always outweigh an ill-conceived, dated notion that we have the right to walk where we want, no matter what the consequences. I'd firstly like to draw upon a few points that the opposition made. The First Lady said that it was very rare that people are killed by cattle. I would like her to explain that to the families who have lost loved ones. If she herself lost a loved one, I don't think she'd give a monkey's whether it was a rare incident. The pain would still be as harsh. They also said our motion is very extreme. Well, surely someone being killed is extreme. Surely a load of sheep being worried by a dog and causing abortions and injuries is extreme. That is why we have to take such extreme measures. They mentioned on several occasions that farmers would close footpaths all year round, and I have to feel they haven't listened to what we've said, because we've said over and over again that farmers want tourists in the countryside. They need tourists, they need the economy, they won't shut footpaths all year round, and they are the ones that are scaremongering when they say statements like that. She says our motion is impractical and actually wouldn't allow me to raise my point of interest on how I would enforce such a motion, so I will tell you now. Any Rambler, before they go on a walk, they will look on a map on the excellent Ramblers website. So what we suggest is that when you go on the website, you can see which routes are and aren't available to you. People would rather do this, and they would rather help and look after their countryside. It was also mentioned about my comparison to walking through a group of lions. And yes, it's a ridiculous comparison because it's a ridiculous thing to do. And me, as a farmer's daughter, I find it ridiculous that people will walk through fields of stock, especially with dogs. Yes, we should be encouraging people to not have dogs on leash, but you can't force people to do that, so we need to enforce it this way instead. To my mind, the opposition has completely misinterpreted the motion. I'd like to draw upon a few points from the audience now, please. The gentleman in the shirt there, he says that when he sees a sign saying "bring it on," that's what he thinks about when he sees a danger sign. Well, if you want to bring it on, I'd like you to meet some of my dad's limousine cross Welsh black cattle and see how you feel about that. And I also agree with your point that humans are dangerous, and that's one of the points we're making. I know we've talked a lot about cattle, but humans can be dangerous to the livestock, and that's a very important part of the argument here today. Educating isn't enough. It's not enough to educate people. As we've seen for the last X amount of years, the education isn't working. People are still getting injured. And the point of whether public have rights on land, well, surely the farmer does have the right to close the footpath. It is his land after all. Members of the House, following this afternoon's proceedings, there should be no doubt in your mind that we need to follow this motion. I plead with you to put aside all your preconceived notions of ramblers' rights and let common sense rule. Side with us to carry our motion, protect our farmers, our animals, and protect our public.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Ladies and gentlemen, before I ask you to vote, and in order to help you make up your mind, I would now like to briefly summarise the main points for and against the motion. Points for the proposition included both livestock and the public are in danger when footpaths collide with animals, and farmers cannot be responsible. Points for the opposition included incidents on footpaths are very rare, and farmers may purposefully close footpaths. May I ask you to vote on what you've heard here today, and not to allow any preconceived ideas you may have on this topic to influence your decision. The motion I'm asking you to vote on today is, this House believes that farmers should be allowed to close footpaths, rights of ways, to the general public when there are animals in the fields. Can I have my tellers, please? Ladies and gentlemen, all those in favour of the motion, please show. All those against? Are there any abstentions? Ladies and gentlemen, the motion is defeated. All that remains now is for me to thank our guest speakers for a most lively debate, to you, the audience, for listening so attentively and participating, and to the Staffordshire Showground for allowing us to use their facilities. With there being no other business, I declare the meeting closed and wish you all a safe journey home.